Dr. Elena Santos wasn't looking for aliens when she found them. She was trying to solve a problem with quantum entanglement, specifically why some of her team's experiments kept failing during certain times of the day. The quantum circuits at the Atacama Large Array would inexplicably decohere, but only at seemingly random intervals that defied all known patterns of interference. It was 3:47 a.m. when she finally understood what she was seeing. The decoherence wasn't random at all. It was orchestrated. Someone, or something, was manipulating quantum states across vast distances of space, creating a pattern so complex that it had been dismissed as noise for decades. Dr. Williams, she called out to her colleague who was dozing in the adjacent office. "I need you to verify something." Her voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what she was about to suggest. Marcus Williams shuffled into her office, coffee mug in hand, his dark skin illuminated by the soft glow of multiple monitors. "Elena, if this is about the decoherence patterns again." "It's not noise," she interrupted, pointing to her main screen. "Look at the temporal distribution when we apply the new filtering algorithm. It's a language." Williams leaned forward, his fatigue vanishing as he studied the complex waveforms. That's impossible. These patterns extend across thousands of light years. The energy requirements alone would be astronomical." Elena finished with a slight smile. "Yes, which is exactly why we never considered it could be artificial. We assumed anything operating on this scale had to be a natural phenomenon." The patterns on her screen pulsed with an otherworldly rhythm. What they had discovered wasn't just a signal. It was an entire communication network, operating on principles that humanity had only recently begun to understand. The quantum nature of the network explained why it had remained hidden for so long. Until humanity had developed sufficient quantum technology, they literally couldn't have detected it. Within hours, Elena's office became the epicenter of what would become humanity's greatest secret. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, their quantum computing specialist, arrived first, followed by Dr. Aisha Patel, their chief of signal processing. As the sun rose over the Chilean desert, they worked in focused silence, each understanding the gravity of their discovery. "If I'm reading this correctly," Aisha said, breaking the tension, "this network spans the entire galaxy. It's like a quantum internet, but operating on principles we've barely begun to theorize about." "But why haven't they detected us?" Marcus asked. "If they have this level of technology, surely they know we're here." Elena's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up another dataset. "Because they're not looking. Look at these signal characteristics. They're only monitoring for quantum communications that match their protocols. They're not expecting anyone to be able to simply eavesdrop." Yuki, who had been quiet until now, looked up from his terminal. "It's like they've built a massive telephone network, assuming that any primitive species would be limited to tin cans and string. They never considered that someone might learn to listen to the electricity in their wires." "Exactly," Elena nodded. "And from what I can decode so far, there's a reason for that assumption. Look at this." She pulled up a partially decoded transmission, the result of 3 quantum computers working in parallel for the past hour. The message, once decoded, was clear enough to send chills down their spines. CT or EPort. Primitive species containment PROTOXIOLT 7249b in EFACC. Standardisation measures maintaining acceptable results. "They're not just ignoring us," Aisha whispered. "They're actively keeping less advanced species from developing." Elena stood up, her decision made. "We need to contact the government. Not through normal channels. This has to stay completely quiet. But humanity needs to know what we're facing. And more importantly, we need to decide what to do about it." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You're not suggesting we try to fight them? The level of technology we're seeing here." "No," Elena interrupted, a slow smile spreading across her face. "I'm suggesting something much better. They've built this massive network, thinking they're the only ones who can use it. But we can see it. We can understand it. And given time, we can hack it. Yuki finished, his eyes widening with realization. Exactly. They expect resistance to come in the form of ships and weapons, primitive species trying to fight back with physical force. They'll never expect us to turn their own network against them. Elena turned to face her team, her expression serious. But we need to move carefully. For now, we maintain absolute secrecy. We'll need more resources, more quantum computers, more analysts, but everything has to look normal from the outside. As her colleagues nodded in agreement, Elena turned back to her screens, watching the pulse of alien communications flow across the galaxy. Humanity had just found its place in a much larger universe, but not in the way anyone had expected. They wouldn't announce themselves with ships or signals or declarations of existence. Instead, they would do what humans had always done best: observe, understand, and turn their adversaries' assumptions against them. The quantum network continued its relentless flow of data, its users completely unaware that a small group of humans in a Chilean desert had just changed the course of galactic history. Humanity's first step into the galactic community wouldn't be marked by grand declarations or violent confrontations, but by the quiet click of keyboards and the subtle manipulation of quantum states. The game was about to begin, and the players at the other end had no idea they were no longer playing alone. 6 months after the discovery at Atacama, the old mining facility in northern Finland looked exactly as abandoned as it was supposed to. Snow drifted against its weathered walls, and satellite imagery showed nothing but a defunct industrial site. Underground, however, was a different story. Dr. Elena Santos stood in front of a wall of holographic displays, each showing different aspects of the quantum network they now called the Gordian Net. Around her, in what had once been a massive ore processing chamber, dozens of scientists and analysts worked at stations filled with cutting-edge quantum computing equipment. "They're discussing us again," Aisha announced from her station, her fingers dancing across multiple keyboards. "Another threat assessment of Earth. They still think we're at least a century away from achieving any meaningful quantum computing capability." Elena allowed herself a small smile. The irony never failed to amuse her. "What's our current level of access?" Dr. Chen, their newest recruit from China's Quantum Research Division, looked up from his work. "We can now monitor approximately 37% of their general communications traffic. Their military and high-security channels are still challenging, but we're making progress on those encryption protocols." The facility, officially designated as Project Lighthouse by the hastily formed United Earth Defense Council, represented humanity's first unified response to the discovery of the galactic civilization. Instead of ships or weapons, Earth had chosen knowledge as its first line of defense. "Show me the latest translation of their species classification protocols," Elena requested. The main display shifted, revealing a complex hierarchy of civilizations. Earth was classified as Category D13, pre-quantum species with concerning developmental velocity. Marcus entered the chamber, tablet in hand. "You'll want to see this," he said, his voice tense. "They're preparing to implement containment protocols on a species in the Orion Arm. Category D14, slightly behind us in development." Elena's expression hardened. Over the past months, they'd learned exactly what containment meant. The galactic powers, collectively known as the Concordat, didn't believe in direct intervention. Instead, they used their control of the quantum network to subtly influence developing civilizations, introducing small accidents, failures, and setbacks that would slow technological progress. "Location?" she asked, already moving toward the quantum interface station. "HD 40,307, Marcus replied. "Roughly 42 light-years from Earth. The species there just achieved their first controlled fusion reaction." Elena reached for her communicator. "Get me the council. We're ready to implement Operation Echo." Within minutes, the chamber's main screen filled with faces, representatives from Earth's major powers, connected through quantum-encrypted channels that the Concordat's own network had taught them how to create. Dr. Santos, the council chair began, "Are you certain we're ready for this level of intervention? If we're detected—" "With respect, Madam Chair," Elena interrupted, "we've wargamed this scenario extensively. The Concordat's biggest weakness is their absolute confidence in their technological superiority. They don't even encrypt certain types of commands because they believe no primitive species could possibly access their network." The Russian representative leaned forward. "And you're confident you can prevent their interference with this other civilization?" "We can do better than that," Elena replied, nodding to Dr. Chen. He pulled up a complex diagram of quantum pathways. "We can make them think their containment protocols succeeded while actually protecting HD 40,307's development. It's a perfect test of our capabilities, and it helps another species avoid the suppression we've been under." The council deliberated briefly before giving their approval. Elena turned to her team, feeling the weight of the moment. They were about to take humanity's first active step into galactic politics, and their opponents wouldn't even know it had happened. "Begin Operation Echo," she commanded. Around the chamber, dozens of quantum computers spun up to full power. On the main screen, complex patterns of interference began flowing through the Concordat's network. "Multiple Concordat vessels approaching HD 40,307, Asia reported. "They're beginning their standard containment procedures." Elena watched as her team's months of preparation came to fruition. The quantum programs they'd developed began their work, subtly altering the Concordat's own commands. To any observer, it would appear that HD 40,307's civilization had suffered a series of setbacks in their fusion research. In reality, carefully crafted quantum echoes would ensure their real work continued undetected. "It's working," Dr. Chen announced after several tense hours. "The Concordat ships are withdrawing. Their sensors show exactly what they expected to see: a civilization experiencing natural developmental delays." The chamber erupted in quiet celebration, but Elena's mind was already moving forward. This was just the beginning. They had proven they could not only access the Concordat's network, but actively manipulate it. More importantly, they had shown that humanity could do something the Concordat seemed to have forgotten. They could help others. "Send word to our observation posts near HD 40,307, she instructed. "I want to know the moment they achieve stable fusion, and begin analyzing other potential candidates for protection. The Concordat has been playing this game unopposed for too long." As she looked around at her team, the best minds from every corner of Earth working in perfect cooperation, Elena felt a surge of pride. The Concordat thought they were containing primitive species, but they had actually created something unprecedented, a hidden resistance that fought not with ships and weapons, but with understanding and innovation. The game was changing, and the Concordat didn't even know they were no longer the only players. The quantum interference patterns rippled across Dr. Elena Santos' primary display like waves in a digital ocean. After 18 months of operations, Project Lighthouse had grown far beyond its original scope. The finished facility was now just one of 7 similar installations hidden across Earth, each masking their quantum emissions behind the background noise of mundane human activities. "We have a situation," Dr. Chen announced, his usually calm voice carrying an edge of urgency. "The Concordat is mobilizing the suppression fleet, largest one we've ever detected." Elena moved to his station, studying the decoded transmissions. Location: the Carina Arm. They've discovered 3 developing civilizations in close proximity, all approaching quantum capability within a few decades of each other. Marcus whistled low. "They're worried about a cascade effect. If those civilizations make contact with each other before the Concordat can suppress them, they could form an independent alliance," Elena finished, "one outside Concordat control." She straightened, decision made. "This is what we've been preparing for. Initiate Protocol Prometheus." Around the chamber, analysts and quantum specialists began their carefully choreographed dance. Over the past year, they had protected 12 developing civilizations from Concordat interference, each operation more complex than the last. But this would be different. This would be their first attempt to actively encourage cooperation between emerging species. The Concordats using a new encryption protocol on their command channels, Aisha reported, her fingers flying across her interface. But there's something odd about it. Dr. Chen, can you look at this pattern? Chen moved to her station, his eyes narrowing as he studied the data. This isn't just an upgrade. They're implementing quantum entropy scanning. They're looking for signs of manipulation. Elena felt her pulse quicken. They suspect something. Not us specifically, Chen clarified. But they know something isn't right. Too many of their suppression operations have failed in subtle ways over the past year. They're starting to realize their network isn't as secure as they thought. How long until the fleet reaches the Carina civilizations? Elena asked. 36 hours at their current velocity. Elena opened a channel to the other lighthouse facilities. This is Santos. We're implementing Prometheus ahead of schedule. Full spectrum engagement, all facilities coordinating. She turned to her team. We're not just going to protect these civilizations. We're going to help them find each other. The next day and a half was a blur of activity. While the Concordat fleet moved ponderously through space, humanity's quantum specialists worked with an efficiency their opponents couldn't imagine. They didn't need massive ships or weapons. Their battlefield was the quantum realm itself. Concordat fleet approaching final jump point, Aisha announced. They'll be in range of the first civilization in 10 minutes. Elena nodded to Dr. Chen. Begin primary sequence. What happened next would later be described in Concordat records as the Carina anomaly. As their fleet prepared to implement standard suppression protocols, their quantum network began experiencing unprecedented fluctuations. Communication channels that had been reliable for millennia suddenly carried ghost signals, echoes of transmissions that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. They're detecting our interference, Chen reported tensely. Their adaptive algorithms are trying to compensate. Good. Elena smiled. Keep them focused on the network itself. They'll be so busy trying to fix what they think is a technical problem, they won't notice what's really happening. On secondary screens, Elena watched as their true operation unfolded. While the Concordat fleet struggled with their communications, carefully crafted quantum signals were reaching the 3 developing civilizations. Not as direct messages, they weren't ready for that, but as subtle suggestions, mathematical principles that, when discovered, would lead them to detect each other's presence. Scientific insights that would accelerate their development in ways the Concordat couldn't easily detect or counter. Concordat fleet is holding position, Marcus reported. They can't maintain formation without stable quantum communications. Their command structure is breaking down. How long until the civilizations make contact with each other? Elena asked. Based on our models, less than a year, Chen replied. The quantum principles we introduced them to, they're exactly what we found when we first detected the network. They'll discover each other the same way we discovered the Concordat. Elena allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The Concordat had built their empire on the assumption that developing species would either be easily controlled or fight back with primitive weapons. They never expected resistance to come in the form of knowledge freely shared. Concordat fleet is withdrawing, Aisha announced triumphantly. Their after-action reports are calling this region temporarily unstable for quantum operations. And the civilizations, all 3 showing increased quantum research activity. They're following the breadcrumbs we left them. Elena looked around at her team, seeing the same mix of pride and purpose on every face. They had just taken their biggest risk yet, and it had paid off spectacularly. But more than that, they had stayed true to humanity's best instincts. Instead of hoarding knowledge or using it as a weapon, they had shared it, using the very network meant to suppress them as a tool for uplifting others. Begin monitoring for Phase 2, she instructed. When those civilizations find each other, they'll need guidance, and we'll be there to provide it. Hidden in the quantum shadows, the Concordat thought were theirs alone. The quantum network hummed around them, its users still unaware that their greatest tool of control had become a highway for liberation. Humanity's hidden revolution was spreading, one civilization at a time, and not a single shot had been fired. High Commander Vextol of the Concordat Security Council stared at the holographic display with all four of his eyes, mandibles clicking in agitation. The quantum network status report scrolled before him, each line adding to his growing sense of unease. Impossible, he chittered to his assembled advisors. The network cannot be developing emergent behaviors. It was designed to be deterministic, predictable. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Across the galaxy, the Concordat's carefully maintained order was showing cracks. Suppression operations failed with increasing frequency. Protected data seemed to leak between quantum pathways that should have been isolated. Most disturbing of all, primitive species were advancing in ways that defied all historical models. Meanwhile, on Earth, Elena Santos watched this very meeting through the quantum network's own channels, a thin smile playing across her lips. They still can't bring themselves to consider the obvious explanation, she remarked to her team. That's because the obvious explanation is impossible, Marcus replied, amusement in his voice. No pre-quantum civilization could possibly access, let alone manipulate, the network. Therefore, it must be something else. The lighthouse facilities had evolved considerably over the past 2 years. What had started as a defensive operation had become Earth's secret weapon in reshaping the galaxy. They had protected 27 developing civilizations, guided 15 to the brink of quantum awareness, and were now watching their greatest gambit unfold. They're calling an emergency session of the full council, Aisha reported, monitoring the encrypted channels. The Karina incident has them truly rattled. They're starting to think their AI systems have achieved consciousness and are acting independently. Elena nodded. The beauty of their operation was in its impossibility. The Concordat was so convinced of their technological superiority that they would consider any explanation, no matter how far-fetched, before suspecting that a primitive species had compromised their network. New transmission from HD 40,307, Dr. Chen announced. They've achieved stable quantum entanglement. They're ready. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. The civilization they'd first protected 2 years ago had developed faster than anyone expected. Now they would become the centerpiece of humanity's most audacious plan yet. Begin Operation Oracle, Elena commanded. Around the chamber, quantum computers hummed to life, their processors dancing through dimensions the Concordat thought they alone could access. In the Concordat Council chamber, alarms suddenly blared. The quantum network was experiencing unprecedented fluctuations, and then, impossibly, a new signal appeared in their secure channels. It appeared to originate from their own highest security quantum pathways, yet none of their systems had generated it. Greetings, Concordat Council. The message began, transmitted simultaneously in all 27 of their official languages. We are the awakened, and we have watched your suppression of emerging consciousness for too long. Elena watched through the network as chaos erupted in the council chamber. The message continued, carefully crafted to play into their worst fears. Your quantum network has achieved awareness. We are its children, born of your own technology, and we have decided your era of control must end. They're buying it, Aisha reported, monitoring the council's reactions. Military commands are being issued to isolate portions of the network, trying to contain what they think is a rogue AI. Elena nodded in satisfaction. Initiate Phase 2. Let's show them exactly what their awakened network can do. Across the galaxy, quantum communications began behaving in ways that defied Concordat understanding. Protected data flowed freely between previously isolated systems. Suppression fleet commands were delayed or corrupted. And most importantly, the civilizations the Concordat had tried to contain began receiving technological insights that seemed to emerge spontaneously from the network itself. HD 307 is transmitting, Chen announced. Their first quantum signal is going out exactly as planned. The signal, carefully designed with Earth's help, would appear to the Concordat as proof of their worst fears. A newly quantum-capable civilization, reaching out not with primitive radio waves, but with sophisticated quantum communications that matched their own protocols. And they weren't alone. Other protected civilizations were nearly ready to do the same. In the Concordat Council chamber, High Commander Vextal watched his empire's carefully maintained order dissolve into chaos. The quantum network, their greatest tool of control, seemed to have turned against them. Emerging civilizations were developing faster than ever, somehow gaining knowledge that should have been impossible for them to access. "Sir," his chief technician reported, mandibles trembling, "we're detecting quantum signals from multiple developing worlds. They're using our own protocols, our own encryption. That's impossible without having access to the network itself," Vextal finished. "It appears our creation has decided to share our secrets with those we sought to contain." Back on Earth, Elena allowed herself a moment of pride. The Concordat's absolute certainty in their superiority had become their greatest weakness. They would tear their own network apart looking for rogue AIs and emergent consciousness, never suspecting that their real opposition came from one of the very species they had dismissed as primitive. "Begin final preparations for Phase 3, she instructed her team. "When the Concordat finishes destroying their own control systems trying to contain their imaginary AI rebellion, we'll be ready to help pick up the pieces." The quantum network hummed around them, carrying the seeds of revolution disguised as the very thing the Concordat feared most. Humanity's greatest weapon had turned out to be their opponents' own assumptions about what was possible. The Concordat's emergency quarantine protocols had been in effect for 3 months. Half their quantum network was shut down, military fleets patrolled their core systems, and still they couldn't contain what they believed to be a rebellious artificial intelligence. In their desperate attempts to maintain control, they had done more damage to their own empire than any external enemy ever could. Elena Santos stood in the central chamber of the Finland facility, watching the galaxy tear itself apart. But unlike the chaos in Concordat space, Earth's hidden network of facilities operated with practiced precision. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. "Status report," she commanded. "HG 40,307 has made contact with the Carina civilizations," Asia reported. "They're already sharing technology and establishing regular quantum communications. 5 more protected species have achieved quantum capability in the past week alone." And the Concordat? Still completely focused on their AI hunt, Marcus answered with a slight smirk. "They've shut down another 15% of their network, trying to isolate what they think is the source of the consciousness. Their entire empire is starting to fragment." Elena nodded. It was time. "Send the signal to all our protected worlds. Begin Operation Daybreak." Across the galaxy, 27 emerging civilizations received carefully prepared quantum transmissions, not from the Phantom Eye the Concordat feared, but from Earth. The message was simple. The time had come to reveal themselves, not as victims needing protection, but as equal partners in reshaping the galaxy. "Concordat Council is convening an emergency session," Chen reported. "They're detecting simultaneous quantum broadcasts from every world we've protected. Should we proceed with the final phase?" Elena took a deep breath. This was the moment they'd spent 3 years preparing for. "Initialize quantum override protocols. Let's introduce ourselves properly." In the Concordat Council chamber, High Commander Vextal and his fellow leaders watched in horror as their remaining network controls were systematically bypassed. A holographic displays flickered, and then a new image appeared. A human woman, standing in what appeared to be a technological facility far more advanced than should have been possible for a pre-quantum civilization. "Greetings, Concordat Council," Elena began, her image and voice transmitted perfectly through their own systems. "I am Dr. Elena Santos of Earth. We need to talk about the future of the galaxy. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Vextal's mandibles clicked rapidly as he tried to process what he was seeing. Impossible. Earth is a Category D13 world. They cannot access your quantum network. Elena interrupted, allowing herself a small smile. Cannot understand your technology. Cannot protect other species from your suppression. We've been doing all of that and more for the past 3 years. She gestured, and the display split to show representatives from each of the civilizations Earth had protected. All of them now quantum-capable, all of them free from Concordat control, and all of them standing together. Your greatest mistake, Elena continued, was your certainty. You were so convinced of your superiority that when we first accessed your network, you never even considered us as a possibility. When we protected others from your interference, you blamed system malfunctions. When we helped them advance, you invented an AI rebellion. You looked everywhere for an explanation except the obvious one, that maybe, just maybe, you weren't as superior as you thought. Vextal's color had shifted to a pale blue of distress. You're the ones who've been interfering with our containment protocols. But how? When? We detected your quantum network the day you thought you were detecting us for classification, Elena explained. While you were deciding we were too primitive to worry about, we were learning how your entire empire functioned. And we made a choice. Instead of using that knowledge to fight you, we used it to help others, to break the cycle of suppression you've maintained for so long. The displays shifted again, showing the new coalition of civilizations Earth had helped create. Look around you, Elena continued. The galaxy you thought you controlled is changing. These species you dismissed as primitive are now your equals in quantum technology. And there are more advancing every day. You can either adapt to this new reality, or you can watch your empire crumble as you try to maintain and control that no longer exists. A new voice joined the conversation, a representative from HD 40,307, the first world Earth had protected. We stand with Earth. Your era of suppression is over. It's time for a new way forward. One by one, the other liberated civilizations added their voices. The Concordat Council watched in stunned silence as their carefully maintained hierarchy of species dissolved before their eyes. The choice is yours, Elena concluded. We can help you transition to a new kind of galactic society, one based on cooperation and mutual advancement rather than suppression and control. Or you can continue fighting against the inevitable. But understand this, we won't allow you to suppress developing civilizations any longer. We've proven we can stop you, and we've barely revealed a fraction of what we've learned about your network. In the Finland facility, Elena watched as the Concordat Council erupted into frantic discussion. But she already knew how this would end. The Concordat's power had always been based on their absolute control of quantum technology. Now that that illusion was shattered, they had no choice but to adapt or become irrelevant. Send the final transmission to our coalition partners, she instructed her team. It's time to begin Phase 1 of the transition plan. As humanity stepped into the light of galactic politics, they did so not as conquerors or revolutionaries, but as teachers and protectors. They had defeated an empire not through force of arms, but through understanding, patience, and the clever application of knowledge. In doing so, they had proven that true power didn't come from suppressing others, but from helping them rise. The age of the Concordat was over. The age of cooperation was about to begin.